Welcome to the Representing Rural podcast by Rural Community Alliance. I am Candace Williams, and today we have Nick Cartwright, who's running for office for Senate. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on, Candace.
Thank you. So we're continuing our series, of course, around rural candidates, people from rural Arkansas who are running for either local offices or statewide offices. So Nick, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to run?
Absolutely. Well, my name is Nick Cartwright. I'm running for State Senate District 18, which covers all of White County and parts of Cleburne and Faulkner County. I'm from the small town of Rosebud, which has a population of 500 people. Lived there pretty much my whole life and graduated high school there. Went to UCA for my bachelor's degree and then moved back home to run for city council and get involved locally. And that's when I started working for RCA for a couple of years. And since then, I've been working in the nonprofit and policy world, working on different kinds of public policy from education to food and farm policy. And now I work for a group called Arkansas Community Organizations, helping low income and working class families get the resources and community power that they need. What inspired me to run was honestly people like my parents. So my parents are both working class, neither of them went to college. And they have really just worked their tails off their entire life to provide for me and my younger sisters. And there's so many people who are doing that across District 18 and across rural Arkansas. They're truly just working, full time. Some of them are working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And they're just trying to provide for their kids so that that next generation can have a better life than they did. And so that's what's inspired me to run. I've run for local office and held local office before, but taking that next step and running for the state legislature, I think is important, especially for a couple of practical reasons. We haven't had somebody run for the state Senate in this area in over a decade. And just to be a voice for rural communities and for young people. We don't have any representation for folks under 30 in the legislature right now. And being someone who's also young, I'm 28, I think it would be important to have those constituencies represented.
All right, Nick. So what are you, so you're running for a Senate district. What's the district number?
18.
Okay, what does it cover? What all does it cover?
So it's all of White County. So that includes towns like Searcy and Beebe, smaller towns like Rosebud, Romance, where I'm from, Bald Knob, Kensett. And then it also goes into Cleburne County, so the Hopewell, Heber Springs area, and then down into Faulkner through like Quitman and Mount Vernon.
It's a pretty big district. So, wow. Okay, so you said it has been 10 years since someone from the more rural parts of White County has ran for Senate or any statewide elected seat or state elected seat.
Yeah, because the lines just changed for redistricting, so it's a little bit different. But as far as the Democratic Party, which I'm running as a Democrat, we have not had somebody run in this area in at least 10 years in either the House or the Senate. So, yeah, it's been a long time coming.
Peace. All right. So what are you hoping to accomplish if you are elected to this office?
So I think it's actually appropriate that I'm on your podcast this week because I just announced today, actually, my rural agenda for District 18. And like all good things in politics, RULE is an acronym, and it stands for Reviving Main Street, Universal Broadband, Reinvesting in Public Schools, affordable housing, and then local food systems. And I'm happy to delve into each of those, or we can kind of skim them, however you want to tackle that.
Let the people know, what do you plan on doing with each one of those letters?
Yeah. So Reviving Main Street to me is all about making sure small businesses have what they need to compete with corporations. In a lot of small towns, we have Dollar Generals and Dollar Trees coming in and shutting down, these local mom and pop stores that have been around forever. And, people might think that's a good thing on its face, but really it harms local economies for the long run. And just making sure small businesses have what they need making their taxes fair, making sure we're investing in technical resources and giving them more access to capital, but also investing in rural jobs, making sure that we're offering grants and loans and new investment for small businesses. I know that our Economic Development Commission has really focused on certain areas of the state, and I think rural Arkansas has been left behind. And then with universal broadband, I think those kind of play off each other because we need broadband and high-speed internet for running businesses. We need it for paying bills. We need it for going to school, going to work. And it's something we've talked about for 2 decades, and we still haven't gotten it done. And I think the big reason for that is because we haven't, put the state investment into it that we've needed to. We've gotten a lot of money from the federal government, and we've been, doling that out to different companies across the state. And I think that has been somewhat successful, and we've seen the pace pick up here recently, but we could be doing more. I mean, we're sitting on over $1 billion surplus, and I think some of that money should be used for broadband. I mean, it's as essential of a utility as water or electricity in today's world. And this is a big one for RCA, but reinvesting in public schools. I mean, we all know public schools are the heart and the hub of rural communities, and whether we're talking it being the largest employer or where all of the social and cultural things happen in a rural town. We've underfunded them for too long. That's an issue RCA has worked on since its inception. And, we've got to do more. We've got to pay teachers better, pay staff better. I think we should end the focus on standardized testing and really prepare kids for not only college, but trade school and going into the workforce, because a lot of kids are graduating these days and they just really don't know what to do. And schools have not prepared them, and it's not their fault. I think our state really has to start making policy that is geared towards making sure students are successful. Probably could do a whole podcast episode or 2 on education, but I'll stop there.
Yeah. Have a full discussion on education. So what do you say to the people that say that the schools have received this this amount of funding, this new amount of funding from the feds because of COVID? And I think the last check, it was like 10% statewide of those COVID related funds have been spent among districts. So what would you say to people that may counter your statement around public school funding and saying, hey, they have all this money now and they're not even spending it?
I will say this. I think we should be spending that money. I think we definitely should, but I don't think too much is ever enough when we're talking about our kids and our future and our rural communities. I just don't buy into that. I mean, I think a lot of the people that would also say that want that money to go towards tax cuts for the rich. And so I just don't see those two being on anywhere near the same level. I don't know the specifics of each, even school in my district that needs to spend that money, but I think it should be on administrators. These are the people that are paid the big bucks to make these decisions and get this money spent. I also think that the federal and state governments should be making it easier for them to spend that money. This is our taxpayer money, and we put all these restrictions and timelines and different things on school districts to spend it, and maybe hamper them in the process. So maybe cutting a little bit of that red tape would help as well.
Yeah, so I wonder, especially for a small district, is it the fear of spending the money in a category that's not allowable? Is it the fear of fiscal distress? I'm really wondering, what is the holdup, for lack of better words, of spending that money, or the lack of urgency around spending that money? Because as we know, our children have really suffered due to COVID, especially education-wise, social emotional wise. And from my understanding, that's what those funds are supposed to be, spent on. So yeah, that's just a question that I have. And it'll be interesting to see how the districts in your the district that you were running in, how the districts in your Senate district, how they spent that money thus far.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good point. I mean, and you can't blame rural schools. I mean, but you never know what's going to happen around the corner. So
right. I feel like that's a part of it. I may be wrong, but I definitely feel like that's a part of it. Just the fear of fiscal distress, and that, those funds may be spent in the wrong category, and then, you'll be in trouble. So
yeah.
And it's a lot of money all at once that that districts have been used to. We get out here and we advocate for funding and all that, and then it's just dropped, and it's like, okay, what do I do with it? So I feel like more support. Administrators need more support around that, especially from rural places, on exactly how to spend that money and the need to go ahead and spend it on things that students need. So what are you committing to do if elected?
Yeah, so I will try to, I guess, answer that more directly than just talking about like the issues and the rural agenda. But I think there's several policies that have to happen to make the rural agenda possible. We have that $1 billion surplus, and making sure, I think they're probably going to try and spend a lot of that in this special session that's supposedly going to happen this year. But, ensuring that rural places have a voice at the table, and increasing funding for those different priorities that I laid out, especially things like housing that really aren't getting funded at all, especially in rural areas. I mean, the housing just doesn't exist for growth or for really to maintain what we have. And then finding new revenue streams. I'll talk about this in kind of the next point too, but we do not have a fair tax code, and we're seeing that play out when it comes to funding school districts and when it comes to funding different state programs. And I think that all gets back to prioritizing working class people and middle class families, people that are out there working hard every day to provide for themselves. And, we've seen, frankly, Republicans, take over state government in Arkansas and aggressively cut taxes for the wealthy and corporations, and that has killed our revenue streams. And so we have to find a way to adjust that. I would advocate for a progressive tax code, and really, reversing those tax cuts. And I think we'd start to see more money flow in. And then, when we do invest in places and we do put grants and loans out there, making sure we're investing it in jobs, and specifically rural jobs, because if you're not in Northwest Arkansas, Northeast Arkansas, Jonesboro, or Little Rock, there really is no one advocating for jobs in your area unless you're doing it yourself. And so why are our politicians not doing that? Why are these Republicans that represent rural areas not doing that right now? And the other thing I'll commit to doing is, being a voice to stop the attack on marginalized people in Arkansas. We've seen that this last week with reproductive rights being taken away. Arkansas had one of the most harsh laws around that, to where if you need reproductive procedures right now, it has to be an extreme circumstance. But also the attack on the poor, cutting Medicaid, cutting state services. The elderly, are always at risk of losing, their retirement or having Social Security cut. And then transgender youth and adults that are just constantly under attack. And I know these are social issues that a lot of rural people may not like to talk about all the time, but it's important because we could be spending time talking about solutions for rural communities, but instead we're attacking marginalized people that already, don't have it great in our state.
It's very interesting that you brought up housing, because I guess on surface people are like, well, rural people, they live where they live. No one is really coming in, so they have to have the amount of housing that they need, right? But that's definitely not the case. Like I moved back home in 2017, and that has been an issue since I moved back. I know of a lot of rural districts where teachers are driving in every day because of that. There's no housing. So I would really like to see more work done around like rural housing that's affordable and that is, good quality and all of those things. So that's a really good point. You have anything else to add about what you're committing to do if elected?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that could be a super long conversation. One of the other things I will mention is a living wage. We recently had the minimum wage raised in Arkansas via ballot initiative, which I think is really awesome. And voters overwhelmingly approve of that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's quite enough. I would fight for $15 an hour in Arkansas. And I think that would put us on the path to making sure that people can afford to live. And even in rural areas, I think people get this misconception that rural areas are so much, have such a less cost of living, which it may be so, compared to places like Little Rock and Northwest Arkansas. But, a lot of the other things you pay for, whether it's goods or just transportation, those things aren't really that much less. And so finding a way to help, especially small businesses overcome maybe that $15 minimum wage would be nice too.
That's a great point that you made about the cost of living, because we typically live so far away from everything. And then I know in my part of the state, and I know this is something I have harped on because it's my everyday life, the roads, so
Yes.
if you have a car and you're able to go back and forth, those roads are going to just, tear it up real good. So yeah, the cost of living to live in rural places is, the transportation alone that cuts into the budget that they think we have. So I'm with you on that. So what are some of the foreseen obstacles to accomplishing what you would like to if elected?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. I think one is honestly my age, just, maybe some of the older politicians, if I were to get elected, not taking some of the issues young people care about seriously, which, aren't that different from older people. We want good jobs. We want, affordable education, affordable housing, things like that. But some of these more contentious issues like climate change or student debt really need to start being talked about in Arkansas. To me, taking action on those is imperative, and we can't wait a decade or two, or it's going to be too late for a lot of our farmers, or you're going to have a lot of people not buying houses or starting families that could have if we would have taken action on those things. I think another obstacle could be, if I'm elected as a Democrat, we would probably still have a Republican majority or even a super majority in the Senate and the House, and potentially, working with the Republican governor. And so finding a way to work around that or work through it, and, come together on the issues we agree on will be hard. Compromise is hard, and working on bipartisan issues is hard, especially in today's political environment. And then I would say also just persuading state officials to focus on rural areas. I know that this was talked about at y'all's conference over the weekend, but a lot of people just are so focused on funding these larger cities, Little Rock or Northwest Arkansas, and it's nothing against those places, but we really have to convince some of these either state officials or even the people in the legislature that rural Arkansas is worth fighting for. It's worth investing in, because I don't think it's that apparent to some people anymore, and so we have to show them that.
Right. Especially, with the census data showing us what we already knew, that people are leaving pretty much everywhere in the state besides, Little Rock, of course, Northwest Arkansas, like the Jonesboro area, and I think it's a spot down there in Southwest or South Central. But other than that, it's people are leaving. So it's kind of hard to fight for that. But that's something that Rural Community Alliance really focused on, as you know, with the cybersecurity and IT, showing the benefit of communities across the state with the same goal. So maybe that's our way forward, like really, making sure that communities across the state with, different demographics, political views, they come together around common issues or common goals. And that's how we're able to get this grant funding. I don't know, but that's something that we're going to keep working toward. So November, You wake up the day after election day. If you are elected, you've kind of shared with me, what you would do. But if you're not elected, what's next for Nick?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I'm honestly just trying to make it through like tonight. But
me too.
Yeah, you got to take it like a day and a week at a time, running a campaign. But I'm open. I'm always going to be engaged politically. Continuing to build the Democratic Party, especially in rural areas where we, frankly, have not been in too long. And when you don't have any, when you don't have different opinions in places, it hurts, and it hurts in more ways than one. I want to continue to be involved. I don't know when or if I'll run for office again if I'm not elected.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see about that. But yeah, I'm just going to keep doing the work and, given the places that are doing the right thing. And I think RCA is one of those. I would even love to help, start reactivating some chapters that were around when I worked there. So, yeah.
All right. So is there anything else you want to add before letting people know where to find out more information about you and your campaign, how they can support you?
Yeah, we have a website. It's cartwrightforarkansas.com. And the 4 is FOR, not the number. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Nick Cartwright AR, in Cartwright AR. And then I would just encourage people to make sure your registration is up to date. We've made it a little tougher to register and get to the polls. So make sure, well in advance that you have a voting plan and that you're bringing people with you, because that's how we're going to change things in rural communities and all across the state, is engaging and getting people to the polls. So, that'd be my final message.
All righty. It's been a pleasure. And as you know, this is not RCA endorsing any candidate when we're interviewing people with the Rural Candidates series. It's just us providing a platform for our members and the friends of RCA to learn about people from rural places running for office. It has been a pleasure talking with you today, Nick. So you take care until next time.
Thank you, Candace. You too.
Bye-bye.